Hello and welcome to the sixth event of our Virtual Thought Leadership Series. I'm Becky Hyde and I'm the Senior Executive of the Corporate and Overseas Business at Medibank. I'd like to begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're standing. And for Addie and I here in the studio, it is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I would like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us here today. Welcome to our Work Better, Live Better Thought Leadership event. We're excited to have you all here. And we're excited to actually help you and your teams and organisations to work and live better. Today we're joined by two very special guests and an important conversation about mindfulness in the workplace. So I'd like to actually welcome Addie, Dr. Addie Wootten and Brett, and I'll introduce them a bit later. Here at Medibank, we're proud to be partnering with Smiling Minds, supporting people to improve their health and wellbeing through the practice of mindfulness. Indeed, it's a wealth of evidence supporting the benefits of mindfulness for an individual's health and wellbeing. But why is mindfulness so important in the workplace? We all know that the workplace can be a high-paced, dynamic and stressful place. Between new ways of working, managing workload, juggling priorities, working in the organisation, working from home, it's a challenging environment. According to a worldwide survey commissioned by a Californian-based work management app, Asana, 4 in 5 Australians suffered burnout last year related to working from home. And whilst last year was a year like no other with COVID, it's important to ensure the mental health of our people is top of mind in the way we lead and manage moving forward and hopefully reach a new normal. With this as context, what role does mindfulness play in supporting our people? What are the impacts of mindfulness on business performance? And how can we practically implement mindfulness in the workplace? It gives me great pleasure to introduce our two guests, Dr. Addie Wootten, who joins us today in the studio, and Brett Kirk, who joins us from Sydney. Hey, Brett.
Hi, Becky.
Addie's a clinical psychologist with extensive experience across research and e-health and is passionate about how we can use technology to support good mental health. Addie is also currently the CEO of Smiling Mind and has been so for the last 5 years, growing the organisation to reach more than 6 million people through the highly regarded Smiling Mind app and embedding mindfulness into schools and workplaces across the country and globally. Welcome, Addie. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
I'd also like to just hear from you, Addie. Could you tell us how you found yourself working in mental health? I know you're a clinical psychologist, and more specifically, you made a real shift in your career to go and work for Smiling Mind.
I did, yeah. So 5 years ago, I was practicing clinical psych, working in big hospitals here in Melbourne. And I could see that, so mental health for me has always been a real passion. I think I've always been a person that's been interested in how people manage life, looking at the challenges that people have throughout their life. I think, you know, everyone would relate to the fact that we go through some really difficult times in our life. And I did at a young age. And that, I think, for me really started me off on this journey of thinking about, well, how do people navigate those things? Why do some people thrive and develop and actually grow from difficult times in their life and other people really find it really difficult? What is it about us humans that actually makes us tick? And so, you know, I've actually been interested in mental health all my career. I'm very lucky to go through high school, study psychology, the end of high school, and then go into studying psychology in my undergrad and then through to a doctorate. And I've moved around. I've worked primarily in oncology, actually, with people with cancer, and started dabbling with technology. You know, how can we use technology to overcome barriers for people accessing support and learning new things? And that led me into a pathway to meet the amazing founders of Smiling Mind, which, you know, really was so exciting because they had so many people using the platform, and I've been able to help grow that significantly. For me, mental health isn't a bad word. It's not a negative. It actually is a positive. And helping people understand that our mental health is actually something, it's a strength. We can build on it. We need to look after our mental health. Changing that perception from a negative to a positive and helping people see the strengths in their mental health is really what gets me up every day. I love talking to people about how we can shift the thinking around mental health.
I think that's a really great point, actually, because we talk about our physical health and accept the fact that we go to the gym and do activities to keep our physical health intact, but we don't talk about our mental health in the same way, and it actually takes real effort to maintain your mental health.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It's the same as our physical health.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is our physical health and our mental health go hand in hand. So if we're not looking after our mental health, we can't have the best possible physical health. So how do we actually shift that conversation? And I think in the context of our work, it's incredibly important to think about mental health in that way, because we've got the opportunity there when we're in our workplaces to actually think about how do we develop people, how do we support people, and that's not just from a career progression or from a skill perspective, it's actually from a human perspective as well. How do we help people develop the skills that will help them have the best possible well-being and mental health?
Fantastic. Thanks, Addie. I look forward to diving into that a bit more in a moment. And now I'll introduce Brett Kirk. Thanks so much for joining us again, Brett. Brett's the former captain of the Sydney Swans with an impressive career in football. And I can't believe this statistic, actually, Brett. 200 games without missing a match.
Correct. Yes.
Incredible. I mean, you would have to have amazing physical and mental health to actually achieve that. So looking forward to hearing about that. You're now the assistant coach at the Sydney Swans, and after speaking to a few people over the last few days, a lot of people credit you for how you drive the culture of the Sydney Swans, and I believe mindfulness is really at the heart of that. So looking forward to hearing about that. And you're a firm believer in meditation and mindfulness and the role that it plays on the footy field and in business generally. Thanks so much for joining us. And could you just take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, I'm really passionate about mindfulness and meditation. And yeah, I guess I'll start with what's most important to me. I'm a dad. I've got 5 kids, husband, and yeah, I love the chaos that brings. And obviously part of my family is, you know, in importance of being able to teach them skills of my young kids. And I dreamt of playing AFL as a young kid, and that path was probably pretty windy compared to most young players, and lots of setbacks and rejections along the way. Ended up finding my way as a mature age player, and then became a leader at the Sydney Swans Football Club, and that set me on a great path. And I was fortunate enough to be part of, as you said, building a strong culture at our football club that's probably envied from outside the walls. And I feel really special that I've been part of that. Since retiring, I travelled overseas with my family to try to give back. You sacrifice a lot being an elite athlete, and you become quite selfish. So we did a lot of travelling. I did some work with the media and some consultancy, but I just love what football clubs do for people, the emotion of it, the things that are in place to just get the very best out of people. And that's why I was drawn back in. I spent 3 seasons over with Fremantle. I've been back at Sydney for the last 6, and yeah, really loving my role and guiding young men not only to be great footballers, but to be great people.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Brett. Brett, quick question. How would you describe mindfulness, and how do you actually practice it?
Mindfulness to me is all about awareness. So awareness of all the things around you, but also the awareness of what's going on inside you. So an understanding of sort of your thoughts and your feelings, and then passing through an awareness of different times when you might be feeling emotional, an awareness of maybe your body temperature and things that are happening. And I think the other thing for me about mindfulness, it's about being in the moment and being able to have an ability to be able to stay there. And it's difficult with the craziness of life and how busy our minds can get, but it can be something that's really beneficial. If I talk about practicing it, I think if I talk about, say, this morning, I have a morning ritual I've been doing for a long time where I get up early, I'll sit and I'll do some mindful breathing, sort of meditation practice for 5 to 10 minutes. I'll do a few yoga poses, depending on how my body feels. Again, that awareness of my body. And then I go to the ocean, and there's nothing like submerging in the ocean to have that feeling of being alive and being present. At the moment, the water's starting to get quite cool. So I was thinking about this morning when I was swimming, when you jump in, you start swimming, you're actually, your heart rate and your breathing becomes quite rapid. And it's kind of like when you're feeling anxious, or, you know, where you're feeling a bit nervous or something's going on, and all of a sudden your breathing becomes quite rapid. And so I think about that, like this morning, was being able to slow things down. And once you start slowing your breathing down, it slows your mind. You becomes a bit clearer in your head. Sort of getting to work, I parked my car. I'm fortunate enough to walk through Centennial Park. Things like just being aware of the trees and the shapes of them, those types of things. This morning we had our main training session here at the Swans. I'll take a group of guys who are interested about doing meditation. We'll do a meditation practice, you know, for 5 to 10 minutes pre-training, just around focus and concentration for those guys. And then for me, probably the other one where I think about it for sort of people, and especially with young families, the dinner table is a great one to be mindful, like turning the TV off, putting the phones, tablets and all things away, and sitting with my tribe and just having a conversation and checking in about the day, and really sort of actively listening and paying attention to each other, because sometimes it might be the only 45 minutes we might have when we're all together and there's nothing else going on. So there's some of the things that, I guess, if I think about my day to day, that how I practice mindfulness.
Thanks, Brett. And is there a difference between meditation and mindfulness?
Yeah, I guess mindfulness is something you can do in everyday practice. Like think about washing the dishes. You can sort of be mindfully washing the dishes in terms of feeling the water on your skin and the sort of the motions that you make. Anything you can really do, you can be mindful. Eating, listening. Meditation's more of probably a formal practice where you, it doesn't have to be sitting all the time, because you can meditate lying or walking, but it's more of a formal practice where you're sort of really keying into different things. But again, it's based around the same things, where the benefits are around that awareness and being in the moment. Thanks, Addie, for agreeing there.
I agree.
You're the expert.
He's nodding.
Yeah. Well, I think you're spot on, Brett. For me, mindfulness is kind of the skill or the way of living that we're trying to cultivate when we're practicing meditation. So one way I like to describe that difference is that meditation is like the gym. Like if we want to be physically healthy, we might go for a run or go to the gym, and that's the practice that we need to do in order to become physically healthy. And it's the same with becoming more mindful. So practicing meditation is the formal way to do that. It's like going to the gym for our mind, and it's that structure that gives us the practice for us to be more mindful. And the more practice we can do, the more easily we can apply mindfulness to everything else in our lives. So it becomes easier to be more present with our kids. It becomes more easy for us to be able to have conversations and do that mindfully, so that we're fully present. We're not racing ahead to the 10 other things that we have to do after that conversation.
That's exactly how we sort of I speak to the playing group, that they go into the gym to work on their muscles. the mind is a muscle. It has memory and those types of things. So the more we can exercise that mind, the more we can equip it and be able to harness it to get the best out of it.
Yeah, I think it's such a wonderful analogy, actually, because I think, as Addie, you were saying earlier, mental health shouldn't have negative connotations. It's actually exactly what you're saying. It's about exercising the skill of how to be present and how to relax a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And as we become more mindful, we're more conscious about the things that we know are good for us and that help us, and what might be good and helpful for me might be different for you, might be different for Brett. But actually paying attention to that and knowing what we need to look after our mental health is really important.
Absolutely. We are now, for the first time ever, we're going to do a poll for the audience. And the question is related to, does your workplace promote mindfulness? So for those of you in the audience, we'd really value your participation in this poll. There's 3 responses. Yes, we have a formal program to some degree, or not at all. And we'll come back to those results shortly. So let's talk about the workplace more specifically. Why should a business invest in mental health support and mindfulness programs for their employees? Addie, over to you.
Oh, it's a big question. Well, I think where we are right now is a really good illustration of awareness around mental health. I think we've gone through a year of a pandemic with complete and utter change and transformation in how we work. We've all had to work very differently for the last year. And I think the one really great thing that has come out of that is awareness around mental health and well-being. I think businesses now are really cognizant of the impact of this changing world that we live in and the role of workplaces to support their people. We spend a huge proportion of our life at work, and helping our staff to build their mental health and their well-being is really important, not only for the individual benefits. So I think everyone will understand that, as good humans, we really want people to be healthy and well, and we want to support their mental health. From a workplace point of view, though, I think it's really important to think about how we cultivate really great cultures and support people to develop skills that will help them thrive at work and at home. I think gone are the days where we've tried to really separate our work life and our home life. And there are pros and cons to that. But I think what we do know is that if we can help a person to thrive both at work and at home, we will get the benefit in the workplace as well. We know that people will perform at their best. When it comes to mindfulness, we know that mindfulness has a whole range of benefits. And if you start with the individual benefits, it's really around the early signs or benefits that you see from practicing mindfulness are things like stress reduction. We see people starting to feel calmer and less tense. But then as people start to learn about mindfulness and how you can apply it to lots of different areas of your life, you actually start to see other benefits like cognitive benefits. So more able to focus and pay attention. We're more efficient in how we process things. We might spend less time worrying about making decisions or grappling with big complex problems. And we also see cultural impacts as well. So people getting along with people and really understanding how relationships are forged and cultivated and built. So there's actually a whole range of benefits of mindfulness in the context of the workplace. And obviously that doesn't stop at the end of the workday. It goes home, like Brett talked about, that, if we can actually help our people to go home and live a really fulfilling life at home as well, connect with their families, really spend good time with them, they will come back to work feeling refreshed and more focused, and they will be more productive. And hopefully they'll stay with the business longer as well.
Yeah, it's such a great point about mindfulness and the impact it can have on not only individual performance, but connectivity and culture within an organisation. Is there anything in particular you're doing at Smiling Mind with your team?
Oh, we have tried so many things, particularly throughout this year. So at Smiling Mind, I think we're good experimenters. So in the last year, we have run every day. We've all been working from home for a year, really. We're back in the office a bit now, but we've been running group meditation sessions every day for the whole team to Zoom into. And mindful movement has been a really core part of that as well. So as Brett said, you can practice mindfulness in lots of different ways, but we found that during that lockdown period, we really wanted to help people start to move and to make sure that they're getting a break from sitting at their desk. And so mindful movement has been really important there. We try and start our meetings with a meditation, so that allows us to focus and be present for the reason that we're there. And Brett I think probably does bits of that in terms of setting people up for why they're there in that moment. And that helps a lot. It makes us much more efficient. It makes us focus in really quickly and try and forget about the other stuff that we might have, naturally brought into the meeting. Lots of different things that we try as a team. And, I think the thing about mindfulness as well is that it's, you don't ever get it 100%. So it's always a work and there's still room to grow and develop. So I think sometimes that's actually a bit of a barrier. People think that they can't do it and that, they think, oh no, I've tried it once and I'm not going to do it because I didn't get it right the first time. But actually experimenting and being curious and trying new things out is really important when you're implementing mindfulness personally, but also in a business.
Yeah, great. And Brett, really keen to hear from you in regards to mindfulness and how you've used that in developing the culture of the Swans.
Yeah, well, it wasn't around when I first arrived at the footy club. So I arrived in the early 2000s. I had really poor flexibility, so they sent me off to yoga to work on that. And I would have been the last person that would probably land in this space, because at the end of yoga, you do this thing called shavasana, which is laying down still and, being mindful. I was horrible at it. I had a really busy mind. As a kid, I was hyperactive. So sitting still for small moments and to be able to not have lots going on in my head, I found it really difficult. But as I found and I discovered it and kept progressing and working with it and understanding that, which is difficult for especially elite athletes, because failure is not something you want to happen all the time. But with meditation and mindfulness, it is about failing and then just resetting yourself and going again and resetting yourself and going again and failing. So I think a lot of people start it and think, oh, I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. Where it's actually, by not being able to do it, is actually teaching you to keep coming back to it, which is such an important skill and which builds a level of resilience and persistence in what you do. With football especially, there's so much around sort of focus and concentration. The game goes for over 2 hours, and then there's moments where you have to make split decisions in like 1 or 2 seconds. And meditation, I think, impacts your ability to be able to think clearly, and especially be able to think clearly under pressure, because you have an ability to be able to regulate your emotion. So late in games when it's under pressure, or there's things coming at you, or there's crowd noise, you have an ability to be able to block everything out, to stay really clear and focused and make really clear decisions and have clarity. And I believe that the greatest players that play the game have a really strong ability to be able to do that. The other thing I think with football is, there's a certain level of an ego to be able to get yourself to a certain level. And I think mindfulness practice and meditation, it keeps you grounded, and you have an understanding of when your ego is getting away, so you can keep it in check. And that's what I was talking about before, that awareness of your thoughts and feelings. Not that you have to control them, but you can have an understanding of what's going on and passing in through your head. So I think they're the key ones. Probably the only other one I was thinking is around sort of leadership. I think in the leadership space, there's an awareness of people, being able to actively listen, being able to walk into a room and to do a temperature check because of how you feel. I could look across the locker and see that there's a guy on the other side. There's something about his body language that tells me he's a little bit off. You can have a conversation. All of a sudden you've picked something up that might be impacting him at the time, which will eventually impact in his football. So again, as Addie was saying before, that physical and mental health is such a a thing that we need to be able to combine together, because football, when I first arrived, was all about physical. It was all about filling that physical bucket as much as you can. But then once you get to everyone's doing the same thing now. So it's the working on the mental space. And we see the players when they're playing at their best, they have a really good concept of what's going in physically and mentally, and they're generally performing to their optimum.
So Brett, when you're working with team members, are you doing that more in a group setting or in an individual setting, or both?
Well, I've sort of tried different ways. When I was over in Fremantle initially, guys were really curious because I had a background in that space, and I think the media probably pigeonholed me as sort of this hippie alternate type guy a while back. And what I found was it's not a one size fits all. When I was first over there, they were sort of trying to put meditation in place, and everyone did the same thing. And I had a guy I worked with over there, Nathan Fife, who's an amazing footballer. And it wasn't for him. We'd sit together and he's like, it's not for me. And the more we had conversations and the more I sort of shared a few different apps to try and a few different things to do, and not to be at him all the time about it, he just eventually finds his way himself, and it's like a real personal journey. And now he's a huge advocate of it, and he continues to play great footy. When I first arrived here in Sydney, I used it at the start of meetings like Addie was talking about. And I'm sure some of the guys early days were like, what are we doing? But it's kind of like most things initially at the start when it's new, it's like you're not quite sure, but then it just becomes commonplace. It's like, okay, you come into Kirky's meeting, we're going to be meditating for 5 minutes at the start, and at times they'll say, my mind's a bit busy, and it's just a really good way for the players to, because they have so much influx of information and they're going from a physical thing into a meeting from different places, to be able to, I find it as a reset and a recharge, and to be able to, again, so they can sit in that meeting and listen, and actually absorb the information rather than sitting and drifting and those things, as we all can do. And I'll put my hand up, I'm no expert, and that this happens to me. But the more we can just equip people with the skills, the better hopefully they can use them and get the best out of themselves.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because both of you have really spoken about trying different ways to practice mindfulness and changing it up a bit. Which is probably not dissimilar to how you'd approach your physical exercise, because you'd go for a walk, some people might go to the gym, probably exactly the same. So having different ways you can practice it probably keeps it really fresh and builds your skill set.
Absolutely. You have to find what works for you. I mean, humans are all different, and we're wired in different ways. We respond to different things. You know, we know if we get to know ourselves well, we start to learn what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And we can also challenge ourselves around, you know, maybe I will try a new thing, and that I think gives us that mental flexibility as well that we all need in every aspect of life. But yeah, it's very important to try and find the right way for you. And I think that's often, it is a turn-off that some people have a perception that mindfulness is only sitting cross-legged for half an hour every day. And I suppose that's one key message to, you know, if you're taking away something from today, mindfulness isn't as rigid as that, or it doesn't have to be as rigid as that. If sitting, meditating for half an hour per day works for you, then that's wonderful. But if it doesn't, there are other ways that you can bring mindfulness into your life and into your workplace.
Yeah, I really liked what Brett was saying earlier about going for a walk and seeing the leaves, noticing the leaves on the tree, and particularly as we're in autumn at the moment, you know, kind of looking at the different colours can be
absolutely
practice of mindfulness.
Yeah, well, if you think about mindfulness, the definition, like Brett was talking about before, it's awareness. So it's cultivating awareness in a particular way, and that is with openness, curiosity, and without judgment. So if you think about those three things, when you're going for a walk, are you open? Are you curious about what you're seeing, what you're smelling, what you're hearing? And are you making judgments about it? And if you are, that's okay, but just being aware that you are judging it. For example, in Melbourne today, it's a bit cold, and we might be wishing that we were in Sydney where we could go for a beautiful swim in the morning. I know that I probably have had a few judgments about Melbourne weather, but being aware of that and how that actually impacts on us and how we feel is one of the core elements of mindfulness. So it's building awareness around what's going through our head, how are we, what coloured glasses are we wearing, and can we step back from that a little bit and just observe things as they are without wanting them to be different.
I've got a really good story. Sorry, Becky. I've got a really good story about that from this morning. I was sort of standing with our doctor watching training, and I just noticed her energy was a bit low. So I just wanted to check in to see if she was okay. And she said, there's lots going on. And I asked her how she sort of got herself back into a presence if she feels that there's lots going on, or how does she recharge? And as Addie was talking about then, it can be a sensory thing. And she was telling me that she'd sort of put her hand onto, it was a pole where we were sort of standing, and she put her hand on a pole, and she said she's quite tactile. So the feeling of something on her hand just brings her back into her own body and space, rather than sort of, as we can do, start drifting away. And when things get a bit, we're a bit uptight, or there's lots going on in our lives. So there's that sensory, the thing of whether it's touch, smell, all that. It's so important, and it's so simple, but it's something we probably don't think of all the time.
Yeah, that's a great example, Brett. Thanks for sharing that. Addie, just for everyone in the audience, there's obviously a lot of stressful situations that can occur in the office, and individually stressful situations where you might be about to go and make a presentation and you're getting that real sense of nervousness occurring where you're losing your thoughts. What kind of tips have you got for people in that kind of setting?
Great question. I'm sure Brett can speak to this. I've never played a game of football in front of 100,000 people, but I definitely know that feeling of stress and anxiety that can build up, and it can be really physical. I think the thing to remember, and the way we teach the role of mindfulness in that sort of situation, is that there is actually a physical response that happens. So our body is hardwired, and our brain is hardwired to pick up on danger, and so we actually get a release of a huge amount of hormones. The body goes into a stress response, and so the role that mindfulness can play there is actually about counteracting some of those stress response processes. So we know that when we practice mindfulness regularly or meditation regularly, it actually changes the stress response in the centre of our brain, the amygdala. So first of all, if we practice mindfulness proactively, so before we get into that situation, if we've been cultivating that sense of sitting and checking in with ourselves and regulating our responses, it can actually mean that our stress response is less responsive, so it doesn't react as strongly. So that's a good way of preparing for those sorts of events, which are going to happen to all of us pretty much every day. There's going to be something that happens in our life that actually triggers a stress response. In the moment, when people understand how to use mindfulness and particularly breathing and focusing exercises, you can use that in the moment as you're preparing for those big events. So, for example, jumping up onto a stage, a live Zoom call, for example, you can actually learn how to regulate yourself so that your stress response doesn't take over.
Yeah.
The thing about the stress response is when it does take over, our frontal part of our brain doesn't work as properly, and we don't think clearly, which means we might lose our words, we might lose our train of thought, we get caught up in all of these feelings. And so finding a way to regulate your body, which does actually start with breathing and trying to get that heart rate down, trying to get the stress hormones less active in our system, is a really, really powerful way of helping people cope with those stressful situations. And, I think we can all relate to the public speaking example. Most people don't like public speaking. And so learning how to tolerate those feelings in your body is really important. But if we do it more proactively, it actually helps us even more. So, for the football example, if we're practicing mindfulness and meditation regularly, when you get out onto that field, you're less likely to be overwhelmed by those hormones and those feelings.
Brett, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that?
No, exactly what Addie was talking about. I think the other one is have an awareness when it's happening. So Addie spoke a lot about the actual mechanisms and the different things were happening. But if you get to a point where you actually have the awareness, so for me, it's like, I call it like the red mist. So it's like, I can feel my body temp start to raise. I can feel my heart rate start to go a bit quicker. I can feel myself sort of breathing, not quite through my chest, but I'm like breathing quite rapid. And then all of a sudden my head feels full. I'm in a space where I need to do something. Otherwise, as Addie said, I'm not going to be thinking clearly. I'm going to start mumbling if I'm talking to people. If I'm going out to play footy, I'm not going to be able to think clearly. So it's that awareness to do it, and then to have some kind of strategy to work your way out of it. And the one that Addie talked about is the mindful breathing, is something that I used whether I was running out in front of 100,000 people in a grand final, or whether I was sitting here before this Zoom call, and then just be able to slow everything down. And for the people at home, let's do a little thing, all right? So for the next 10 seconds, you can keep your eyes open or your eyes closed. All you need to do is focus on the breath that comes in through your nose and then out through your nose. So you're focusing on the cool air that passes in through your nose and the warm air as it passes out. In through the nose, out through the nose. And all you're doing is focusing on the feeling of that breath. One more in and one more out. If you open up your eyes, it is something that you could do sitting at your desk at work if you've just taken a call or something's happened at home, or the boss is not happy with you, or there's lots of going on. You don't have to close your eyes. No one knows you're doing it. But I know personally, taking that 5 seconds just made me feel like my shoulders dropped a little bit. I feel a little bit more relaxed. So yeah, really simple things. And whatever you're doing, you can do them anywhere. And people don't even know that you're really doing that practice.
Yep, you can do it in a meeting.
Yes, you could.
That's great. Well, we've got the result of our poll is in on whether mindfulness is promoted in the workplace. And thank you everyone for responding. That was fantastic. So to yes, it was 23%. To some degree, 57%, and then no, 20%. Addie, does that surprise you?
Not really. I think the middle one, so 57% saying to some degree, is an interesting one. And for me, that is probably about people are aware of what mindfulness is, or the word mindfulness. And I think a lot of businesses talk about mindfulness. But I think we're still at a point where there's high awareness, but not high engagement or use of mindfulness. So they might not be actively teaching their people about a bit more information about what it is or how to use mindfulness in the context of a workplace. And it's probably not integrated into the way you work. It might be something that you do off on the side. So that doesn't surprise me. It's great to see that 23% actually do have a program or a practice, or it's integrated in some way. So I think there's still quite a long way to go in terms of how do we help businesses bring mindfulness into their culture and their way of working in a really meaningful and effective way, like Brett has done at the Swans.
And Addie, you've got a Smiling Mind has a workplace program, and we were talking a bit earlier about culture and how mindfulness can actually impact culture, engagement, productivity. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. So Smiling Mind has been working in the workplace setting for about the last 6 years. And we've worked with lots of different businesses of different shapes and sizes and industries. And I think the one consistent thing across all of those experiences is that it's not enough to talk about mindfulness. We really do have to find the way of bringing mindfulness to life, of doing mindfulness. So you can read all of the articles you like about mindfulness, and you can think about mindfulness as much as you like, but it's not going to help you. It's kind of like thinking about exercising. It unfortunately doesn't help you. So I think the way we work with businesses is really around introducing the concepts and helping people understand what it is, what the science says about mindfulness, and then the really practical ways that you can bring mindfulness into the way you work and the way you live. The other aspect I think that we've found is that it's really important for leaders to lead this. And I think there's probably lots of people on the call at the moment that are really great at bringing mindfulness into their lives, but they might not have been able to bring it into their workplace because they're not in that position to do so. And so bringing it into teams is really effective. But if you can bring it into a whole organisation, that's where you start to see that transformational change, I think, because it becomes part of the way you operate, the way, there's a change in the way you do things. There's a greater degree of compassion and empathy and respect for each other that actually filters through the whole organisation. So the way we work is to train up front, and then we try and make sure that we give people the tools that they need to keep going. Mindfulness is great at the start, and you think, oh, this is definitely for me, I'm going to do it. And then often motivation peters out. So we make sure that we use technology to help people stay on track. And we also try and find the advocates and the champions within the business to be that sustainability piece, really. They need to advocate for mindfulness and make sure it stays around. And it's been really effective for lots of different businesses. And I think the interesting thing is to see different businesses take it on in different ways. So, and come to it for different reasons. So for some businesses, it might be that they're seeing that their people are burnt out or really highly stressed. And so the way we introduce mindfulness there might be different to the way we introduce mindfulness in an organisation where performance and, so that high performance culture piece is the focus. So there are different ways that you can introduce mindfulness for different reasons and for different businesses.
And I guess from a workplace perspective, with flexible working so widely accepted now, making that transition between the workday and your home space is quite difficult. Have you seen that as being a real opportunity from a mindfulness perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the benefit of mindfulness is that it's not something that you learn at work and it's only relevant to your work life. It's relevant to your whole life. And helping people sit with and be aware of their experiences right now, and maybe people are loving working from home, or maybe they're finding it really challenging working from home, but actually giving them skills to navigate that in a flexible way, I think is really beneficial. And mindfulness can give you that you can actually, if you've got kids at home and you've been through that experience of homeschooling and working from home, you can actually use mindfulness practices with your family, and as Brett has talked about, and you can also use mindfulness practices just for yourself. So there's absolutely a benefit, I think, in terms of managing that work-life balance.
A lot of organisations... Oh, go, Brett.
Sorry, Becca, I was just thinking about some strategies. One, initially before sort of obviously people working from home a lot, but I used to drive home, obviously maybe get home late, lots going through your head, and I used to just sit in my car for 2 or 3 minutes, and it's kind of like just, I don't know, I think like scuba diving, you have to decompress sort of. So you're getting back in your body, okay, I'm going inside now, I'm dad, I need to make sure I'm present. And I do some mindful breathing, and then I walk in the door, and I'm hopefully not carrying everything with me from the day. But I was thinking as well, like if you're at home, there's some other things that maybe you could do is you can change your clothes or something, or you go for a walk, or you have a shower, or something that's again, it's that awareness of the tactile or taking yourself into the moment, so out of the space you're in and into another space, even though you're still in the same space, by doing something, it actually actively can change your mindset. Okay, well, I'm no longer at work. I'm doing something else, and I'm in this space, and this is where I need to be right now. Everything else can take care of itself tomorrow.
Exactly. And it's committing to that, isn't it? Like, if you are at home and you don't want to be thinking about work, it's about actually saying, I'm going to put that aside for now, and I'm going to focus on being with my family. And the same at work. So consciously learning how to say, well, I have got an inbox of 500 unread emails, but now's not the time for me to focus on, that. And I'm not going to get, spin out of control and worry about it. I'm actually just going to focus on what I'm doing right now. And so mindfulness is that it's broad, but it gives you such great skills to manage those really complex situations that can sometimes spin us a bit out of control and feel overwhelmed.
Brett, really keen to, if you were reflecting on that poll and the results of the poll, so we've got 23% yes, 57% somewhat, and then 20% no. And if we were doing that poll with the football clubs, what do you think the response would be?
I'm not sure, because you're never inside the walls of other football clubs, but I think there's an understanding now the importance of players' mental health. So I'd like to think that there's a lot more opportunities for players. There's a lot more support around them, a lot more developing skills so they can manage the stress, the pressure, the social media, all the things that come with it. And hopefully that we're trending in the right direction. 5 or 6 years ago, I'd say that, we're probably just touching the surface. I know there's a big push in terms of being able to, I think it's one, obviously, for the health of the players, but I think football clubs probably will now get an understanding that when the players are at their best, they're actually mentally at their best as well. So I'd like to think that every club's in a really good space, but yeah, I can only speak from the Swans' behalf at this time.
So do you think, because obviously football clubs are organisations, and a football club is very driven around teamwork, high performance culture, because you've got to be at your best when you're on the football field. How has mindfulness helped the Swans in achieving that?
Well, I can only really speak on my own individual, behalf when I talk about that, and which I sort of spoke a little bit about before. I think there's so many benefits that you have, not only as an individual, but in a team sense, as I spoke about before, and sort of that ability to be able to look around the locker room and just be able to identify with one of your mates is a little bit off today, just to check in with him, and simple little sort of skills, but also a presence of mind to be able to do that. That's helping us as a football club, but also that's helping both of those guys when they leave here, because, the lifespan of a footballer at the moment, I think, is about close to 6 years. So there are some of them will be less than that. So they're not here for a long time. So if we can continue to equip them with the skills to not only navigate what can be a quite ruthless industry that we work in, as you said, it's high performance. Everything's really driven to be at a high level. And if you're not, you're going to get constant feedback. You're not only going to get feedback from within the walls, you're going to get feedback from outside media pressure, and it all's coming at you. But if we can help them navigate that and to be able to regulate their emotion and to have a presence about them, it can only be really positive in terms of whether that's a football club, whether that's a business, whether that's a family. I think you prioritise what's important in your environment, and then you get what you're able to, what you put out there, and hopefully it will flourish.
Well, no doubt you're doing an incredible job at leading by example, that's for sure.
Try hard. I'm not sure, as I said before, I'm any guru, but I've lots of experience of trying again, and I'll I guess it's just about sharing your experience and letting other people discover it for themselves rather than let them think that they have to do exactly what I did.
Yeah. Thanks, Brett. Addie, the Smiling Mind app, can you tell us a little bit about the workplace version of that and what it's trying to achieve?
Yes, I can. So the workplace program for us is about all of this conversation, really. We really want to help people develop skills that will help them with their mental health, their well-being, their relationships, their ability to perform at work and to feel successful in their work. And so, yeah, the way we work with businesses is usually that mixed approach. So working to introduce the concepts of mindfulness. Not every organisation will have an amazing champion like Brett. So we come in and really try and help inspire people, engage them with why mindfulness is important, and try and make it as tangible as possible. And then the app is there as the tool to help support people over time. So as I said before, we know motivation takes a big drop after you start a lot of things, and mindfulness isn't immune to that either. So actually giving people the practical guidance that they need to keep at it, to keep practicing mindfulness is really important. And that's where we see technology playing a really important role. We've all got a phone. We've all got, those reminders that are coming up over and over again. Why not use our phone for good and actually use technology to help us learn to cultivate a bit of mindfulness. We work with businesses, lots of different sizes, some really large global organisations have implemented our app and have used it widely. And there's some really strong benefits that businesses are seeing in terms of wellbeing, but also in terms of productivity and engagement. And I think at the moment that level of wellbeing has taken a bit of a hit in a lot of industries, and so it's a very positive, proactive and preventative approach to supporting mental health and wellbeing rather than waiting until people are showing signs and symptoms of distress or stress. It seems to be a really great program for businesses that want to be much more proactive.
We were talking before this session started and you were sharing some insights with me about what you've seen occur during COVID and the changes on utilisation with Smiling Mind. Could you share with us what you're saying?
Absolutely. So, last year we have never seen demand like we saw across all of the audiences. So Smiling Mind itself offers programs to lots of different ages and stages of life. We do a lot of work in schools, and we saw that there was a really strong demand from parents, from kids under 12, and from teachers, and then a huge influx of businesses calling us and asking us for advice. I think last year really shook a lot of people in terms of trying to understand how you support people when we're working remotely, when it's difficult to get people into the same space, into a room. So, actually actively working with businesses to help them craft experiences for their staff was a big focus last year. We saw 1.25 million new people come to the Smiling Mind app last year, which is phenomenal. Wow. And so, in some ways it's really encouraging because we're seeing people proactively look for tools like ours, but it's also a bit concerning because we know that there will be an impact on our mental health and wellbeing. Hopefully people are starting to look at that more proactively. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about the alignment between mental health and physical health. Like, let's not wait until we've got a significant problem to deal with. Let's get in early and make sure we're helping our people with skills that will tangibly make a difference to their well-being. And mindfulness is a relatively simple, low-intensity approach. It doesn't take too much time. It doesn't mean your people need to be away from their office or their desk for too long. We can integrate it in a really seamless way, but it has a really big impact.
And I'm sure there's a lot of parents in the audience, and you were talking to me particularly about the increase that you've seen in, I think it was children under 12 or...
It was, yeah. So we saw a 350% increase in the number of kids under 12 coming into the app. And as you can imagine, we tracked that over time, and it spiked when we went into lockdown. Unfortunately, in Victoria, we went into lockdown more than other states. So we saw that spike happen quite a lot last year. And I think, and if you are a parent and you're thinking about how do you take what we've been discussing today and introduce it to kids, it's a very similar approach to how us as adults can use mindfulness. It's really about teaching kids to learn to pay attention to the here and now, and to tune into things that will help build their awareness, so they get out of their thinking and their worrying and those cycles of rumination that we can all get into, and they bring themselves back to the present moment. And so within the Smiling Mind app, there's lots of guided mindfulness practices and meditations that kids can use from 3 years old all the way through to adulthood. So it's really important, I think, to introduce these ideas to kids as early as we can, because hopefully then they'll start using them for the rest of their lives.
I know you've given us a fair few tips through this, but we've got a question from the audience, and that question is, do you have any tips for switching off a busy brain, and particularly for getting to sleep at night? Brett, we might hand to you first.
Well, I was just thinking then, when you're talking about children, because I've got a few of them, but the two youngest ones are under 12. And one of them, she has a really busy mind, really active. She's quite creative. So there's lots going on. She ruminates about things that might have happened at school during the day. So we just use a little app that they lay in the bed, I lie on the floor with them, and it's like a mindful bedtime story where someone's talking, they're sort of guiding them through about being in their body and being mindful of where they are and that presence, but also through a bedtime story, and found it to be really, really effective. And there's so many different things out there. Like, I'm a big fan of Smiling Mind. They've got some great strategies in there, but I think the thing is to be able to go to bed, like in terms of to sleep, like no phone, no TV, not too many other distractions. That's probably the first one. And then if it's your mind that stays busy, then it's about finding what works for you. As we did before, it can be the mindful breathing. It could be a mantra. It could be counting. It could be, again, using some kind of mindful app to guide you through. There's so many different things, and it's such a personal discovery, as we said before. If you're that person that struggles to get to sleep, you just experiment with a few different things, and you'll find you'll land on one. But it's not about trying it once and thinking, oh, it's not for me. Being able to try it a few times, okay, it didn't work, I'll try it again, and then obviously exploring. Once you find something that works for you, you'll find huge benefits, because meditation and mindfulness, I think the benefits for like sleep and stress and those things, I think scientifically, and I can put my hand up to say it has helped me significantly. Yeah,
it's the number one area of use in the Smiling Mind app is our sleep programs. I think it's such a common experience to find that you're not able to get to sleep, and it's often the first sign or symptom that you have of potentially carrying a lot of stress and feeling like you need to do something. So yeah, 100% agree with Brett's comments around finding your tool to try and tame that mind and unwind before you go to bed.
Fantastic.
I would have lots of committee meetings laying at bed, especially early on in my football career, worrying about things, so staring at the ceiling, and you'd think about one thought and then it'd go to another and then to another, and then in half an hour's time I'm thinking about something that's totally random. So we call that monkey mind, where the monkey sort of jumps from vine to vine, which is thought to thought. So it's an ability to be able to, I guess, in a sense, calm all that down and focus on something, so then your mind is not distracted by those other things.
Thanks so much to both of you. That's all we have time for today. And I'd like to say, I hope we can continue this conversation after today's event and be a partner with you and bring mindfulness to your organisation. Here at Medibank, we're here to support you in building a healthy workplace. So thank you both, Addie and Brett. Really appreciate your attendance. And thanks to everyone in the audience for engaging in the poll too. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Loved it.